Stonewall Forever is a short documentary. There's a longer documentary about the Stonewall Uprising made by, I believe, PBS. But this one is a short documentary. It's about 20 minutes that outlines some of the key components and the results of the Stonewall Uprising. It's called the Stonewall Uprising, the Stonewall Riots, the Stonewall Rebellion, and it just depends on your choice or your political lens, how you describe it. So Stonewall in itself was it was a local gay bar. It wasn't great conditions, but it was a place where gay, queer people, trans people, lesbians could find freedom, right? Where they could be without judgment in their diversity around race, sexuality, and gender presentation. Then on June 28th of 1969, the police raided the bar, arresting trans women and drag queens. Those trans women and drag queens fought back against the constant harassment by the New York Police Department. It was a uprising that lasted 3 days, and it's considered the pivotal moment or the shift in the gay rights movement. Gay Alley is mentioned in the film. It's a location in Washington Square Park in Manhattan. The park is huge. It has a marsh, a cemetery, a parade ground, a gathering spot for avant-garde artists, a battleground for chess enthusiasts. It's a playground for canines and children. It has served various roles for its community throughout the years. One of those was kind of a safe haven for the queer community in the late 60s. It's where many of the LGBTQ plus community convened and felt safe during the early 1960s because police did not often bother them there. And they were outside of the park, they were under a great deal of scrutiny and constant harassment. So they kind of considered the park a safe place to be. The Gay Liberation Front formed in 1969 in New York after the Stonewall Uprising. It was about liberating LGBTQ folks, gaining rights. It was an activism organization. A little bit about the Kent Massacre, which was also mentioned in the film. Kent State is a university, and remember, and during the first week, I told you all that the 50s, 60s, and 70s was a period of time that was an atmosphere charged with protest and a fight for rights and liberation. The Kent State Massacre happened on May 4th of 1970. An anti-Vietnam War protest had begun on Friday, May 1st. A second protest was given on Monday, May 4th. On May 1st, that Friday, there was police-involved protests in local areas around the school, not on the campus, but around the school. Saturday, it was agreed that the National Guard would be deployed onto the Kent campus, where there were still protests, included burning of some of the buildings. May 3rd, in response to what was happening around the city and on the campus, Governor James Rhodes actually incited anger with his speech. He did not instill anything that looked like calm. And it was determined that the May 4th protest wouldn't be allowed. But they still went out and protest on May 4th. And according to the Kent State University website, on May 4th, 1970, members of the Ohio National Guard fired into a crowd of Kent State University demonstrators, killing 4, wounding 9 Kent State students. The impact of the shooting was dramatic. The event triggered a nationwide student strike that forced hundreds of colleges and universities to close. The Kent State shooting has been linked to Watergate. I'm not sure specifically how, but it has been linked to Watergate, which is the scandal that rocked Richard Nixon's presidency, and he ends up impeached. According to the Kent State website, they are arguing that there was some degree of provocation that existed causing the students to be shot at and causing the National Guard to shoot into the crowd. That the students were not fleeing, which is one of the rumors, that all of the students were shot in the back. They argue that the students were not fleeing when the National Guard initially opened fire. Only one of the 4 students who died was shot in the back, and one female student who had been walking to class, but the other female student had been a part of the demonstration. I guess they are addressing some what they call misinformation that has circulated throughout the years. The protests that happened at Kent, along with the different protests that was happening around, were pivotal moments in the protest history of this country, and the human rights violations that were happening during that period of time. In addition to being a parade, what else was Pride about? Pride was about a riot against police violence. What is meant by a rite of humiliation? So I'm going to address these two together: what is meant by a rite of humiliation, and what is meant by we are not a protected class. So it was illegal to be gay in New York during this period of time. It was illegal. It was against the law to be gay. And any perceived same-sex behaviors were grounds for arrest. That could mean, literally, someone who is perceived to be female is not dressed in what is decided as female attire. Someone who is perceived as male is not. So it's not about the acts of sex. It really was more about an aesthetic. It was about an appearance. And so it oftentimes led to police officers having free rein to harass queer people outside and around Gay Alley. So up until 1980, in a court decision, the New York v. Onofre, police officers would publicly harass and humiliate people who they perceive to be gay or queer. Though that humiliation could be disrobing them, anything that would cause a public spectacle. So it wouldn't just be that they would be practicing the law in, handcuffing, detaining, arresting people who were who they believed to be gay, but it would actually be an act of publicly humiliating them, taking excess measures during their detainment, even if it didn't end up in arrest, taking excess measures to ensure that that person was humiliated and dehumanized. And so because of the fact that it was literally illegal to be yourself in the world, and because of the constant harassment and humiliation, that is what's meant by rite of humiliation, and we're not a protected class, or we were not a protected class. What is Christopher Street Liberation March? It is the first Pride March. It is done on Sunday, June 28th, 1 year after the Stonewall Uprising. It is the 1 year anniversary, and it is essentially the start of what becomes Pride Month. What is the meaning and intention of the "We Are Everywhere" slogan? It means that gay people are part of humanity, right? The queer community, the LGBTQI plus community is a part of humanity and permeates every aspect of life. You're going to have people across races, across class, across gender, across sexuality, who identify with the queer community. It's intended to connect all of those struggling for justice. What is the campaign to end intersex surgery? So intersex surgery is when you are born, the doctor determines by looking at your genitalia if you are a boy or a girl. Science has proven that hormonally there is a spectrum of sex, but we exist in the world where there's just a binary, you're either boy or a girl. Well, some people are born with ambiguous sexual organs. And so what happens while they are infants is the doctor and the family decide what that person will be. They will decide whether or not they're going to raise them as a girl or raise them as a boy, and then give them sex assignment surgery or intersex surgery then, without that person actually growing and deciding, you know, if they want to keep their parts the way they are, if they actually identify more along the lines, if they're female of center or male of center or somewhere in between. The choice is taken. So the campaign to end that surgery is about not deciding someone's gender based on kind of an arbitrary conversation between the parents and the doctor at the time of someone's birth. List of some of the restrictive social structures that govern our lives: gender, sexuality, white supremacy, patriarchy, colonialism, sexism, ableism, classism, racism. All of those things are governing our lives. And so I will end this one here.